Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the ever originally and humbly named Pat Flynn Show. I am joined here by somebody who just told me how to pronounce their last name, which thank you, because I often have to ask that on air, but here we are again asking it on air. Stephen Phelan, as in Phelan to communicate. Thanks for taking the time to join me, man. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you asked. It's fun to be with you.
So this is our first time talking, and I spent some time kind of looking into your work, and it's really eclectic and very generalist, which speaks right to me. You're doing a lot of really cool things. You're a writer who's written for a lot of different organizations on a lot of different topics, but take us back, give us a little bit of history of kind of where you come from and how you got to be, kind of doing the types of writing and the projects that you're working on now.
Sure. Yeah. It's a story in a lot of ways that's pretty common. I kind of I'm one of those conversion stories. So I was actually born Catholic into a terrific Catholic family. And despite that, because of my innate, profound genetic stupidity, I kind of did one of those extended adolescences, right? So you go through college, you're not sure kind of exactly what you're even doing there. You come out of college and you just kind of be for a while, So I definitely did that.
Yep.
Nothing of the really spectacular or sinful variety, just a lot of hanging out and just not really sure where to go. So by the time I figured that out, I'd been through jobs as a public relations person with a Broadway outfit, working at a really fancy hotel. So I actually have met a lot more celebrities than your typical host or your typical guest, I bet. Some funny old stories back there. But they just put me eventually through the slow conversion until my brother gave me a book from C.S. Lewis. Mm. And when that happened, he's got a lot of fantastic books, most of which I end up reading, but this one was just a collection of daily readings. And I think this year's worth of daily readings in this one book took me about a month to get through. I just read faster and faster. I was trying to slow down, but
well, that's interesting. Most people, it's mere Christianity that gets them, but that wasn't the case for you, huh?
Well, it was actually, but it was those excerpts in this sort of daily readings book.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea that we were actually supposed to think about our faith. I think I came up like a lot of people were like, it's just, Jesus is your buddy and he loves you no matter what. So there's no real call to your life, and just don't worry about anything and have fun and be cool to people and you'll go to heaven.
Yeah. Sort of like this, the moralistic deism, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Dreyer's onto something. I think a lot of people are still there too. For me, it was a gentle reawakening there just through C.S. Lewis. And I realized at the time, kind of late in life, I guess that I was probably my mid-late 20s then, that I wasn't an idiot. We were supposed to think about our faith. And at the same time, I was being challenged by some really smart, like Ivy League trained atheist friends. Mm-hmm. We get into these debates. I do okay, but I was always, a couple steps behind. Mm-hmm. And I actually brought my younger brother in. So the older brother is the one, my brother Mike, who gave me the C.S. Lewis book. My younger brother had just come out of Gonzaga, and he came out swinging. The kid's brilliant. And he would sit down with no Ivy League, credentials or anything in these circles and really just have his way with these guys. And then I realized, like, wait, yeah, we're supposed to think about this, but we actually have better answers than we've been told. So that led me, again, I fight conversion. I'm like a lot of people, I resist God as much as I can for as long as I can. Mm-hmm. But eventually it found me in my 30s after several more jobs and everything in a slow conversion and working at a pregnancy home here in Phoenix. It found me at Steubenville, where I studied philosophy and got a master's in philosophy there in basically 2006 through 2008. Mm-hmm. And that's really when I started to come out swinging.
That's fantastic. That's really cool and interesting to hear. You have a lot of kind of cradle Catholics who are maybe stewed culturally in their faith, but they don't really explore it intellectually. And if there's one thing that I've found having my own conversion experience is that really nothing beats the deep, rich intellectual, history of Catholicism. And not only does anything beat it, but nothing even comes close to it. And discovering that was so enriching and so alarming to me at the same time. That I'm with you there 100%.
That's well put. It is that sense of alarm that finally takes that to wake a lot of people up. But that's well said.
Yeah, and something very kind of wrong has gone on, hasn't it? Because it's not like there wasn't a sort of rigorous intellectual kind of muscle behind the faith. There was for a very long time, but these past couple of decades, it seems like that type of catechesis, for whatever reason, has taken a back seat to this kind of, this Jesus is your buddy kind of guy. So, don't worry about thinking or arguing why this is true. Just, be nice to people and, show up on Sundays at least. And, you'll probably find your way into heaven. And I think that's really dangerous. I think, because I guess you might be kind of a statistical exception there, because I think most people who kind of spend time in just that form of faith or Catholicism, they're the ones who are emptying out of the pews. I don't see them typically following the same path as you, as kind of discovering that intellectual tradition on their own. Usually they just kind of go, well, what's the point? I don't really see the point in attending Mass anymore, or being Catholic anymore. I'm curious your experience on that.
Yeah, that's very common, unfortunately. And it's true that there is there's nothing in history to compare to the richness, the intellectual, even the cultural diversity, if we can use modern terms. But the church has genuine cultural diversity. All over the world, the church retains its essential elements while sort of working with and converting the culture that it's in. So if you go to Africa, for example, and you're sitting in a church, and I've been blessed to do this when I was working with the pro-life movement, you sit there and you hear the most amazing, like 3- and 4-part harmonies from the entire congregation in a church, singing songs that often they were in Kiswahili, so I didn't always know what was going on, but it was so beautiful, so authentic, so unafraid, and just people jammed into churches. They can hardly build them fast enough in a lot of places in Africa.
Yeah, glory to God for that. It's incredible that the African culture, the Catholic African culture, is like, I want more of that in America.
Oh yeah, and if you see it there, that only grows. That sense of this is what's right about the world. This sort of uncluttered approach to the faith. It's really still not just cultural there, but woven into everything. In America, the cultural aspects of Catholicism took over. The formation dropped out. As Pope Benedict pointed out so powerfully lately, the culture in the seminaries was directly attacked and undermined and changed. And then that filtered down, of course, into the priesthood, into bishops, and to a lot of people who kind of didn't really believe what they were saying anymore.
Yeah.
And that conviction is what I think led a lot of people just to wonder what they were doing there. I mean, they wouldn't always be like me, they wouldn't always push back, but they'll sort of drift along for a long time. And at a certain point, especially I think the last 15, 20 years here, they have a real alternative and a confident atheism. So when they hear guys like swinging away at the faith and getting away with it and not really challenge strong, actually there have been some strong challenges, but for them, that's their wake up call. So they don't have to pretend like they're asleep for half a day until they can get to the game. Like they get to actually be challenged, and that's what people really want. We say we want to get along with the culture. That's not what converts people. They want to be challenged and woken up. So
it's a really
good. The church isn't going to do it. The atheists are going to do it, or even more troublingly, the Islamists are going to do it.
Yeah. That's an excellent point, because even though I consider pretty much all of the new atheism just a heap of intellectual garbage, and for many years I would have considered myself an atheist, but I at least started with the old atheists, like the good old atheists, right? Nietzsche, Sartre, Russell, like the people who actually thought about things and engaged with theistic arguments rather than just name call. But you're right. If we owe the new atheists anything, it's that they have provided a challenge, and they have really come out swinging. That I think because of them, we have actually seen something of a very strong resurgence in people saying, "Oh, look, we need to put our thinking caps back on." And we've seen a very strong response in terms of apologetics and an intellectual defense of the faith because of these honestly shrill, petulant people like Harris and Dawkins and all of them.
Exactly, yeah.
So I guess we do owe them at least that much, despite all the other cultural damage they've done and all the unfortunate minions they've created that you just have to deal with incessantly on YouTube comments and things like that. I mean, it's just, it's like, it's no longer like a village atheism. It still is like on the level of thinking. It's still that stupid, but it's amazing the amount of influence that's had. But
well, it's fun too. I don't know if you ever run into Alistair McIntyre anywhere, but he's got this great line. He's got lots of great lines, but one of his great lines is in After Virtue early on, where he talks about, these sort of challenges. Not, this was written 30 years ago, so not exactly the same challenges, but he talks about like the really flawed arguments that you hear in a lot of places. And he goes, to paraphrase here, I don't have it in front of me, but it's basically like, well, this is, of course, great stupidity, but it's the great stupidity of very intelligent people. We're storytelling animals. So a lot of what we not just bring to the world, but even before we can bring anything, we're actually receiving things from the world. And what we're receiving mostly is this story. The Christian story is the one that was really just hollowed out in the 20th century. Like you said, the early atheists in the 19th century, into the 20th century, they started getting confidence. They started getting influence. They got into the universities. They started, they took that sort of Cartesian split between science and faith, between faith and reason, and they really started like militarizing it in a lot of ways in the sciences, not realizing that many of the greatest scientists of history are Catholics. They're Christians. These guys are not slackers at all. You look at the greatest inventions up until the 20th century, and it's almost all Catholic intellectuals and priests. A lot of people just don't know this history. So you get here, and then you have this latest wave of, you're right, lame arguments, very poor logic. Dawkins, especially, to me, is offensive just intellectually. And I like the atheists who actually kind of let him have it too.
Yeah, that's what I encourage people. I'm like, if you're a Dawkins fan, like, don't read the theistic critiques. Read the atheistic critiques of Dawkins. Like, just so you know, like there are better atheists out there. Like, at least go, like, there's Alex Rosenberg. Now, I think that he's absolutely insane to embrace the full-throated naturalism that he does in all of its conclusions, but at least he's willing to be consistent.
Yeah, there's guys, and Daniel Dennett too is actually a philosopher. He's got real philosophical training. Mm-hmm. He's not as angry and silly as the rest of them, but and a lot of times I think it's actually worthwhile to engage these arguments. Some of them, sometimes there's fresh aspects to them that actually make you think, and a lot of times you treat people with respect, and then later down the road you actually have an opening for a talk about conversion.
Yeah,
hopefully it's not your conversion to what they're thinking, but it's bringing them into the faith. And a lot of people have come in that way. If they've given themselves to this sort of intellectual awakening that they have via the new atheism, then when they see how much more Christianity has had, when you actually turn on your brain, then that's a huge opening for a lot of people.
So you're obviously a big cultural commentator, so I want to get your opinions on this. I think, because obviously it's hard for somebody to kind of like go from like a Sam Harris, minion to like embracing supernaturalism in its full rigor. That'd be too much egg on your face, right? But then somebody like, say, Jordan Peterson comes along, and he seems to be kind of serving as a bridge away from this dogmatic, shallow, empty new atheism, and he seems to be opening people up and serving as a sort of a middle ground or a channel or whatever you want to call it, where I think he's kind of taking a lot of people away from this new atheism camp. And I know that there's obviously many different opinions on him from people who are both religious or not religious, and I haven't entirely made up my mind, but I kind of am seeing him as a sort of somebody who's helping people maybe to cross over, so to speak, not to the afterlife necessarily, not yet, but to cross over and kind of make that, and to see, okay, maybe there is something, maybe I wasn't willing to entertain, C.S. Lewis right away, but this Peterson guy has opened me up to a different way of seeing it or thinking about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I hate the name, the intellectual dark web, but because there's nothing dark about it. They're doing their own YouTube videos and saying what they really think. But I guess I get the point that they're sort of breaking a third way between these fracturing political and faith divides in the country. And the country really is coming apart. Charles Murray has done a lot to show the sociological, like economic, personal aspects of that. But it truly is happening in this country. Like, there is no secular salvation for this country.
What's happening? Like, honestly, I'm like, is it secession or civil war? Like, how is this ever? Like, can this ever be reconciled? I see such a divide now that I just like, I don't see us like ever coming back together and shaking hands. You know what I mean?
Well, probably. You always have to take a step back. I think a lot of it, like if you get it up to your eyeballs and social media and all that, it's already done. Pull back, it doesn't look a lot better, but you can actually be at some peace and think your way through it. And like when you read a guy like Jordan Peterson, or you watch his videos or whatever, you do see a secular, and he is secular in his approach, a secular way to sort of understand the Bible, to at least approach in a civil way those people who, are sort of being kicked out of the far left. Like, the dark web is actually mostly populated by these intellectuals who are otherwise traditional orthodox leftists.
Yeah, they're leftists. They're like leftists who just decided to arbitrarily stop here rather than there. You know what I mean?
Or because they were so personally attacked, they didn't have a choice. It's like those professors, was it at Evergreen or Yale? Or
yeah, the Weinstein and those guys. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they get attacked personally, and they're like, hey, I've burned incense with you guys at all the right altars. What's the problem? And they don't realize that what they're being kicked out for was just being alive, basically. If you can't conjure the right amount of outrage at the right moment,
yep,
you're out. Which I think that's actually the country is coming apart, but I think that sort of extreme LGBT thing is burning itself out. And I think they're moving so fast that even a lot of people on the left are like, what have we done?
Yeah,
and that's our baby, but we don't know what to do now.
And that's where like the Weinsteins and the Harrises and these guys, like, do they not see that like this is their product? This is just the logical ends of the foundations of their beliefs. And just because they've decided, well, I'm just going to arbitrarily stop here because this is enough for me personally, they don't seem to be able to make that connection. Right? They don't seem to be able to see that all of their philosophy, their ideology, this is just a natural extension of that. So like their feigned outrage at the outrage crowd, I just don't have much sympathy for it, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think they're genuinely shocked. They did come at it through this Nietzschean will to power thing, whether or not they realize it. Like, it's interesting about the left, like how little they know about their own intellectual history.
Yeah, I don't think they genuinely even understand it. Like, it's just it has never occurred to them, right?
Right. Yeah, they're not even curious. Like, they know what they have to do now. They're always the tip of the spear.
Yep.
And they get pushed into things, and a lot of them always knew when to conjure the right amount of outrage. But the modern left, at the political level, it's Ocasio-Cortez currently, but the whole LGBT thing surrounding it, they've been working in corporate boardrooms and media outlets and universities for decades. So by the time the RFRA thing happened in Indiana a few years ago, they were loaded.
Yep.
And the power that they were able to conjure immediately when Mike Pence, who's then the governor of Indiana, signed into law the Religious Freedom Restoration Act version at the state level, by that time they were loaded and ready. And they were able to get major corporations to pull out immediately based on a complete and deliberate misunderstanding of what the bill was and what it would do.
I remember. Mm-hmm.
That's real power. That's real strategy. Now,
yeah, I'll give them this. They are politically effective. I will always give them that. Like, they have always been quite politically effective. I think they're philosophically incoherent, but one need not one for the other.
But remember, that's all they have. Like, that is their faith. They're not taken up with other things of faith. Most of them have no kids. They really are just work. And because they have so much money, a lot of their work now is full-time activism strategy. Like, that is their faith. And it's pure Nietzschean will to power.
Yeah.
That's the only principle. So everybody who thought they were acting on principles, and it's interesting, like these professors who are now in the dark web, whatever, and they got kicked out because they weren't angry enough at the right time at the right things. Mm-hmm. And they were called hateful and bigots suddenly for no reason that they can understand.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize that that's, like you were saying, it's just the latest version of this thing that they've been a part of for a long time. And some of them are actual, like Jordan Peterson. I think Sam Harris, to a certain extent, like, are real classical liberals in a certain sense. Like, they want to know the history of their ideas. They want to go back. They want to understand it. Some of them only care about it once they realize they're out. Like, what just happened? Like, and then, okay, well, this is Marx and the Frankfurt School, and the sort of what gave the intellectual roots the sexual revolution. So that was by the late 60s. That had been kind of a bottle that was shaken for a long time. They just needed their moment. That opened up, and because the sort of the cross section there of technological advances with the pill, the social advances. They'd been in the schools with quote unquote sexual miseducation in the schools for some time, breaking down natural senses of modesty, breaking down relationships between parents and children, making the teachers the authority away from the family. I mean, this is a Marxist project.
It has, yeah. This has been a long time in the making. Yeah, this isn't like, it seems like things have just like suddenly, taken a giant leap. But I mean, you trace this stuff back, this has been brewing for a long time.
And they used to be more open about it. Like the original earlier Marxists said what they were doing. Lenin wasn't shy about what he was doing.
The useful idiots, like he was very direct.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff attributed to a lot of those guys. It's so perfect. Some of it's apocryphal, but I know they said some of it. But either way, like whether it's apocryphal, whether they really said it, didn't they do it? Like that LBJ line about, what he would do to those N-words, that would get them to vote for Democrats for decades.
Yep.
He said a lot of stuff like that. You can't actually find that quote from him. But isn't that exactly what he did? And isn't that exactly what happened?
Yeah, I know.
Like, okay, maybe it's an apocryphal quote. Who cares? That's what happened. So that's how a lot of Marxism works. It works underneath. It doesn't always say what it's doing. They used to be more confident. And I think they are again now because they don't have to hide it.
Yeah, it really is so subversive and malicious, and it's a very, very difficult thing to try and understand how to even begin to battle it when so many people are. And I say it's a malicious thing, but I don't want to imply that the people who are bought into it are themselves malicious. That's the kind of brilliance of it. It gets people to buy in on what they think are good intentions.
Right. It is really a cultural malice that takes form in different people to the extent to which they actually buy into it and make it their reason for being. Like if that's the case, they can really be a weapon. Like these poor kids, the most extreme version of this are the small kids in elementary school who are, a lot of them are actually autistic. Mm-hmm. Like they're having a hard time fitting in at school, and they realize that if a boy puts on a dress, or if a girl starts calling herself a boy, mm-hmm. They go from pariah to hero overnight,
instantly. Mm-hmm.
And so many kids, and this is actually waking up, I think, a lot of parents who are otherwise perfectly leftist. I mean, they live conservative, but they vote left and progressive. Mm-hmm. But when they see their kids, like through no act of their own, go from typical little boys, maybe with some social problems, to being girls overnight, to being taken out of their hands, like because they're not even allowed to say anything anymore.
Yeah,
like that's a wake up call for them. So I do. I don't think there's a secular. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to keep going. I think you're answering my question. I was going to say, do you see this as a tipping point? Like, what do you think is coming out of all this?
In some ways, yeah. But it's only for honest people, and we're a very deeply dishonest country. So the extent to which it actually works, it's still really up to God. It's still a matter of having saints. Mm-hmm. I think it's an opening for a lot of people who get the wake up call because they look around and they see the Christians really didn't hate them. The Christians really weren't bigots. The Christians were really just trying to live their life and try to point to the true nature of the human person.
Yeah,
and really trying to say so I see that happening all over the place.
Like,
whether or not,
Chick-fil-A isn't just serving spicy chicken sandwiches with a side of homophobia. Like that actually isn't happening.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and so but we'll see. God's still in charge. God has let this 100 years of Fatima play out, right?
Oh yeah.
And so nothing ended on October 13th, 2017. But a lot of things are really just accelerating and reaching sort of the point of reductio ad absurdum. That they can't get any crazier, or maybe they can. Who knows? But
who would have ever thought? But I think just to go back to we'll hold off because I do want to get into the pro-life thing with you here. But I think that some people, kind of have this religious attitude towards America, but I'm sure, both you and I would agree, like America is not the church. There's nothing like that guaranteeing the preservation of America till the end of time. So I guess I'm not entirely optimistic that our country is going to, make it through all this stuff. I know some people are saying, well, look, this whole leftist ideology is going to collapse. It's going to implode. It's conflicting with itself on too many levels, even just between the trans and the feminists, like those two can't even coexist apparently. But I don't know, man. It seems like people are willing to even just bite the bullet and just live with these absurdities and inconsistencies. And I'm not in a position to prognosticate on this. I guess I'm just withholding. I would say I'm probably more pessimistic than I am optimistic. Would you fall on that side with me, or are you more optimistic, or where are you with this?
Well, on the secular end, completely. There is no salvation. There's no, once you've given up reason, then where are you going to plant your flag?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can hide from it. You can move further into the suburbs. You can, do what the secular version of a Benedict option, which is, I don't know, like huddling around the Dallas Cowboys and working your job or something. I don't know what that is, but
that's a really good way to think of it. Just keep going into your sports teams.
Yeah, and pretend like nothing's going on, and then realize that these people already have all the heights of culture.
Yeah, and sports are going down too. And they know that. They know that sports are like one of the last cultural barricades. Obviously, they do, which is why they're attacking it so aggressively right now.
Yeah, I do not recommend Bill Burr, the comedian.
I can't say I've ever heard anything from him, but continue.
I really don't want to be the guy to introduce you to him. I'm sorry. He fits well within this the comedic, very foul-mouthed, crass version of the dark web. A guy who really says all the stuff that everybody else is afraid to say, but peppers it with enough, I'm just kidding stuff to where, like, he kind of gets away with a lot of it, and he's also just so fierce about it. It's kind of hard to. But anyway, so he really has a big problem with what they're doing to the NFL. You talked about sports being sort of a last refuge of an institution that hasn't yet been taken down by the far left.
Yep. But
he goes, well, what happens every year? For a couple of weeks, they get them to dress like little girls. They put pink ribbons on them, and then basically they have this pious thing like, what is that doing in my game? Like, we can't just watch a game for a couple of hours without being reminded that there is still breast cancer. Like, you can see how obviously insensitive and everything this is.
Yep.
But he says, like, and it's happening in baseball, and then that becomes the wedge for the LGBT, sort of the equality stuff, which is, again, at the front edge, it's all tolerance and gentleness, all the stuff that everybody loves and respects. But before long, the Christian stuff has no place.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, it does not coexist. And he was just, and he's not a Christian. He talks sometimes like he's going back to his church, which is obviously the Catholic Church, if you get in the details, but he also bashes it at the same time. So yeah. I'm not making him the example or anything. I'm just saying that a lot of people are being forced out of a complacency, even in these weird secular, foul-mouthed, otherwise left-wing sort of ways. Is that enough to save the country? I don't think so.
Yeah, because how sad that it took like the San Francisco 49ers to go down for you to finally wake up, right?
Yeah.
Like, how sad. Like, that means that we might be very well beyond past the point of rescue if it's just the sports teams that you care about, to the extent that they could mess with everything else, but once they touched your football game, that was enough. Well, too late, buddy. I'm sorry. Like, the game is lost at this point.
Yeah, but isn't that what makes it so great to be Catholic? Like, it's actually a fantastic time to be Catholic. All the sort of, I don't know, soft or white, whatever you call it, the persecution, and the way that people are being pushed out culturally, I think the Benedict option, I think Rod Dreher is onto a lot of stuff there. Like, you actually have to be intentional about it. And that is going to grow conviction, and it's going to grow more integrity in how people live and practice and talk about their faith, and that will actually attract people. And we are seeing that. Here in Arizona, even in the suburbs here, we have this fantastic Bishop Olmsted here,
mm-hmm.
and the churches are growing. There are increasing vocations. I mean, there was like a historical dearth here, so they were still behind the curve as far as priestly vocations. But
yeah.
And it's funny now that America is now mission territory. Like, Ireland and America used to send missionaries all over the world. Now Africa and the Philippines.
Sending them here, yes.
Exactly. We're the mission territory now.
Yeah. Deeply needed too.
Yeah. So this is all extremely, historically fascinating stuff that we're living through right now. but this is why it's good to be Catholic right now. Like, God put us here. He knows what's going on in ways that we can't even begin to fathom. And he's calling us to faithfulness right now where we are. So that's why I know that's why you write. I know that's why you do the show. And I think a lot more people are just figuring out creative ways to break old boundaries between media, between groups that are not supposed to talk. Like, everything is being broken down right now. So there's opportunity in the chaos.
I agree, because when people have their sort of their final foundations pulled out from them, whether it's a sports team or whatever, they're kind of left in the air looking around like, what happened and where do I go? And
Exactly.
I think that might be, there's absolutely opportunity in there, even if they don't figure it out themselves and start to look back. Okay, maybe that whole religion thing that I shoved off when I was 16 actually had a little bit more to it. Maybe I should go back and investigate that. So I'm with you. It is a great time. And there are things to be optimistic about. So I think this is the right segue. Obviously, culturally, there's huge divide, but we are seeing a resurgence in particular policies, pro-life being a huge one. I mean, I've never seen the pro-life movement get so much attention, so many public advocates. I think technology has been a great liberator there, because I think for the first time in a very, very long time, if ever, the culture is just now exposed to actually hearing the pro-life side of things. Whereas before it was just the narrative was just so unidirectional, just so one-sided that I think a lot of people just didn't even know there was a pro-life argument to be made. So, that is kind of really cool with, especially what's recently going on with Alabama. Now it seems like Missouri is going to do something similar. So I want to get your, because I know you've done a lot of work in the pro-life movement. So I want to start talking about this and get your opinions there.
Yeah. Well, that's everything you just said is right. The technology is opening up ways for people to hear things. I think technologically speaking, the most important development has been the 4D ultrasound.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, on YouTube, it's hilarious. It's a dark comedy to see that somebody on the left, when they see those things, will actually call them propaganda.
I know.
A straight up video, like the pictures of the Holocaust were propaganda. Like when somebody is that far into a corner, really all you can do is pray for them, and you keep up the best efforts wherever you can. So yeah, technology has opened up huge swathes of opportunity around the world, in the country, and it's emboldening people at the level to really hold their politicians accountable. So when you have enough of the critical mass, as they do apparently in Alabama, and less so, but somewhat in Georgia, then actually you start to see some movement. So that conviction we haven't seen for decades, and that's really, really cool to see. I also think there's just the pro-life movement has grown. I think. If you ever heard Kristen Hawkins from Students for Life, like the conviction that she has, she's not pretending to go into McIntyre and all this other stuff. Like, she's just swinging away, helping these kids in colleges to actually wake up. And she knows how to speak that really, or the people she works with, this whole team knows how to speak that emotivist language that moves people these days. So it's actually chipping away at the lower ends.
Good.
And we also have the demographic advantage that so many people who believe in this have killed their kids.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't last, because a lot of people go into universities where they're sort of propagandized the other way. But a lot of them have just killed the people who would otherwise take up their argument. So
yeah, no kidding, right? It's sort of self-limiting in a way there.
Right. Between contraception and abortion, do what you want, but and I think Christians starting to realize that we can't just mindlessly throw our kids into this culture where they're going to be turned against us with a bunch of really not just bad, morally bad ideas, but intellectually bad ideas. So
yeah,
there's more Christian schools, there's more Catholic schools for being faithful. Focus is on fire, changing hearts and minds, working actually in the secular universities. I think it's a fantastic time to be Catholic. And if I have a hope, it's not for the country as a whole on secular terms. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's running its natural course. It's just living in late Rome, the American version of late Rome.
Yeah, that's how I see it. I think that's really the closest analysis and analogy that you can give. I mean, the similarities are eerie and sort of frightening. But I get, the abortion debate. I mean, on one level, it's so sad that we're even having it because it's so deeply disgusting. But on another level, it's a really important debate to have, especially among young people, because in order to even have this debate, it makes you question or ask all the biggest questions in life that you really can't find satisfactory answers to as a secularist, as an agnostic, and certainly not as an atheist, right? Like, what is a human being? Does human life have value? If so, where does that value come from? Like, what substantiates that? What grounds that? So, is as horrific as the circumstances are that have driven this debate, bringing this debate forward into the sort of public sphere, and especially in the college campuses, again, I think is another opportunity, because it gets people thinking about positions that they otherwise just sort of assume but have never really worked out, and it gets them questioning a lot of these unsearched assumptions, which itself, I think, certainly you have the examples of the people who are just who their will is so locked on murdering babies that all you can do is pray for them. Like the mental gymnastics and the contortions that they're able to perform in their head, and how far they're willing to go with their denials just to hold on to their position. Yes, those people exist, and they're usually the ones that start throwing stuff or spraying people with chemicals or stealing. Like, you can't argue with those people. But right. for so many other people who and I've really seen this happen, and I've had conversation with this, and they start to open up and consider things in a new way. And I think when that happens, it kind of leads to a sort of overall worldview paradigm shift.
I think so. And yeah, you're right. Like, once you've torn everything else down, what do you even stand on? So you can sort of ride the edge of that wave for a while. You can be you can know how to conjure the right amount of outrage at the right time, at the right people, and you can kind of be swept up in that for a while, but it's a self-consuming thing. Like, it's not a life-giving thing. Really, it's that the church understands what the true source of life is, even before the biological. Like, the true source of life is in our Creator. So just that anthropological fact is how the church can actually understand what these things really are.
Yeah.
And when the world is ready to stop screaming, the church will still have the arguments and hopefully be living consistently with conviction and with love, about, this is what the real alternative looks like. So that's why I think you and I are really close on the lack of secular hope for the country. And just recognizing the opportunity that this is for Christians and for those who actually hold on. Like, how many times in the Bible, how many times have the saints said, hold on through these times?
Yeah. And what important lessons those are to go continually revisit. Because I think there is, like, obviously, I say I'm somewhat pessimistic perhaps for America, but as Catholics, we're ultimately obligated to be optimists, right? In the grand scheme of things. So
sure.
I think that's important to keep in mind. So yeah, man, fascinating. But, we've kind of covered a span of territory here, for which was kind of.
Man, I'm breathing hard on this end. I don't know about you, but that was a sprint through a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was. So I think that's first off, it's just a kind of conversation, but it all connects, right? Everything that we've talked about really kind of comes back to a certain secular worldview, a certain sort of, ultimately, I think, an atheistic, materialistic philosophy that has just permeated so deeply into our culture that so many people just assume unwittingly that, and we're starting to see such a breakdown, fortunately. So I don't know. Again, I'm not great. I'm not Groundhog Phil here, so I don't have much to predict. I think we can kind of assess, and we can see, okay, makes sense. This is where it came from. What will the country look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? I honestly have no idea. I think you're absolutely right that it's a great time to be a Catholic, and I'm excited about that. But let's finish with this. You do a lot of writing, extremely interesting, and have a lot of good things to say. Where can people kind of keep up with you or connect with you, and just get the scoop on the things that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. These days, a lot of the contracting stuff I help people with. Like, I think it's just a lot of the stories of the church, a lot of the stories the church needs to hear right now are really just buried in the pews and in the trenches. So what I'm trying to do right now is help a lot of people just to sort of draw that out. And it's how beautiful, how true, how good can we make that basic, pew level narrative of the story of the church? How can we make that really shine and really speak to the world where we're in? I've been really blessed to help out with Catholic Answers. So I'm helping edit their online magazine these days. And if there's any of your listeners who really feel strongly about the faith and defending the faith in the sense of apologetics, would love to talk to you about what we're doing over there at Catholic Answers Magazine online.
Beautiful.
Just at Catholic.com, you can find the site through there. And always got several things in the hopper, but those are the main things right now. And I love meeting people who get it, and who really know what's going on and who keep the faith, and not optimism, but a true sense of reality and confidence and joy through what is actually a really hard time in history. So it's just a joy for me to be able to talk to you about what's really going on in the world.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting and connecting with you, and we're going to have to continue this conversation because it's too good to just drop the thread here. So we'll just say this is part 1.
Right on. Sounds great to me, Pat.
Beautiful, man. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.